My husband looked me dead in the eye while my father lay in the intensive care unit and told me that my parents were my problem. He explicitly stated that his money was his and my money was mine. I did not scream or cry. I just smiled, agreed with his new rules, and immediately stopped sending his family $3,000 every single month. A few weeks later, his entire carefully crafted reality shattered into pieces. I am Natalie, 34 years old, and working as a supply chain director in Chicago. Before I share exactly how I dismantled my husband's fake empire, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic partner who took your sacrifices for granted. The hospital corridor smelled of strong bleach and old coffee. I stood under the harsh fluorescent lights, clutching a stack of medical billing documents that felt heavier than bricks. Through the glass window of the intensive care unit, I could see my father, David. He lay in a narrow hospital bed, a web of tubes and wires connecting him to monitors that beeped with an agonizingly slow rhythm. The stroke had hit him entirely out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon. The doctors assured me he would survive, but his mobility was severely compromised. He needed immediate and intensive inpatient rehabilitation. Furthermore, our childhood home required urgent retrofitting. He needed wheelchair ramps, a stair lift, and a completely modified bathroom just to be able to return home safely. The hospital billing department had just handed me the devastating estimate. Because of a technicality in my parents' insurance network, the out-of-pocket cost was going to be exactly $15,000. It was not an impossible sum for us, but it required liquid cash immediately, and my parents simply did not have it. I turned to my husband, Ryan. At 35 years old, working as a regional sales manager, Ryan curated his image meticulously. Even now, standing outside an intensive care unit, he was adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit and scrolling through his phone, looking entirely inconvenienced by my family's tragedy. "Ryan," I said, keeping my voice low so the passing nurses would not hear the desperation cracking through my professional composure. "I am not asking you to pay for it. I am telling you that I need to pause the $3,000 monthly wire we send to your mother for the next 5 months. I need to redirect my quarterly bonuses to cover my dad's house renovations and medical bills." Ryan finally looked up from his screen. His jaw tightened in that specific way that meant he felt annoyed by my reality. "We cannot do that, Natalie," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "My mother relies on that money for her mortgage. You know she is on a fixed income. You cannot just pull the rug out from under her because your dad did not plan his retirement medical coverage properly." "My dad worked hard for 40 years. I shot back, the anger finally burning through my physical exhaustion. "He had a massive stroke, Ryan. This is a life or death medical emergency. And let us be entirely clear about where that $3,000 comes from. It comes from my account. It is funded exclusively by my bonuses. You told me your commissions were tied up in long-term tech investments, so I stepped up to help your mother. I am simply taking my money and using it for my father when he needs it most." Ryan stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. He always tried to use his height to intimidate me whenever logic failed him. "Do not bring my investments into this," he warned, lowering his voice into a harsh whisper. "My capital is illiquid right now, which is exactly why we need your cash flow to maintain the family obligations. Do not drag my mother into your family's mess. Your parents are your responsibility. Your money is yours. My money is mine." He delivered the ultimate ultimatum, expecting me to crumble. He expected me to cry, to apologize for being unreasonable, and to quietly figure out how to take out a high-interest personal loan to save my father while continuing to fund his mother's luxury lifestyle. That was the dynamic he had established over our 3 years of marriage. He set the rules, and I absorbed the financial and emotional stress. But as I looked at his smug, perfectly shaved face, something inside me snapped. It was not a loud or explosive break. It was a quiet, cold severing of the invisible strings he had used to control me for years. "You are right," I said. My voice was eerily calm, completely devoid of the panic he was waiting to see. Your money is yours, and my money is mine. Ryan smirked, clearly satisfied that he had successfully put his wife in her place. Glad we are on the same page. I am going to head back to the office. Let me know when he wakes up. He turned on his heel and walked away, his expensive leather shoes clicking sharply against the hospital linoleum. He did not look back once. I did not watch him leave. I walked over to the small waiting area at the end of the hall, sat down on a stiff vinyl chair, and opened my laptop. I connected to the hospital public network. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I logged into my separate banking portal. This was the account that held my executive bonuses, the account Ryan could not legally touch but constantly dictated how I should use. I navigated directly to the Scheduled Transfers tab. There it was in plain text. Patricia monthly support $3,000, scheduled to deploy on the 1st of every month. I clicked cancel. A prompt popped up on the screen asking if I was sure I wanted to permanently delete this recurring transfer. I did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. I clicked confirm. The screen refreshed. The transfer was gone. The $3,000 would stay exactly where it belonged. Ryan had wanted strict financial boundaries. He had explicitly demanded that we operate as separate financial entities to protect his precious invisible investments. He had just given me the exact permission I needed to stop carrying the weight of his family's expenses. I closed the laptop feeling lighter than I had in years. Ryan thought he had won the argument by drawing a hard line. He had no idea that by drawing that line, he had just cut off his own oxygen supply. I was not going to warn him. I was not going to negotiate or beg for his understanding ever again. I was simply going to let him experience the harsh reality of the rules he had just created. The next 14 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare executed on my end in absolute silence. I operated with ruthless efficiency. The $3,000 that usually vanished into Patricia's bank account was immediately deployed. I hired a specialized contractor who came highly recommended by my network in logistics. Within days, my father's house was transformed into a bustling construction zone. Ramps were poured over the front steps, door frames were widened to accommodate a wheelchair, and the downstairs bathroom was completely gutted and refitted for accessibility. I paid the invoices directly from my phone while sitting at my kitchen island, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction with every cleared transaction. My dad was getting the care and the safe environment he desperately needed, funded entirely by the money Ryan had just told me I could not touch. Meanwhile, Ryan strutted around our house with the inflated confidence of a man who believed he had successfully dominated his wife. He misread my silence as submission. He genuinely thought my lack of argument meant I had capitulated to his demands. He assumed I was secretly taking out a high-interest loan to cover my father's medical needs while leaving his mother's monthly stipend completely untouched. His arrogance became downright insufferable. One evening, he walked through the front door, carrying a sleek leather-bound golf bag. New irons, he announced, dropping the heavy bag in the hallway with a loud thud. Custom forged. The guys at the firm swear they add 20 yards to your swing. I had to pull a little from my liquid cash, but it is an investment in networking. He even showed me the custom engraving on the handles, acting as though he had single-handedly secured our financial future. I looked up from the contractor blueprint I was reviewing on the dining table. They look expensive, Ryan. Quality always is. Nat, he replied smoothly, walking to the bar cart and pouring himself a glass of expensive bourbon. But that is why we work hard, right? To enjoy the fruits of our labor. How is your dad doing? He asked the question like it was a tedious afterthought, a minor administrative detail he was forced to endure before dinner. He is making great progress, I said evenly. The house renovations are fully funded and underway. He comes home on Friday. Ryan raised his glass in a mock toast. See, I told you that you would figure it out. You just needed to budget better. It is all about financial discipline. I smiled. A tight, perfectly polite smile. You are absolutely right, Ryan. Financial discipline changes everything. He had no idea. He was drinking expensive bourbon-swinging custom golf clubs and lecturing me on fiscal responsibility, completely oblivious to the fact that the ticking time bomb in his financial ecosystem was just days away from detonating. As the calendar inched closer to the first of the month, Ryan escalated his subtle gaslighting. He started dropping passive-aggressive comments about my spending habits, seemingly setting the stage to justify his own luxury purchases. When I bought a new ergonomic office chair for my remote workdays, he sighed loudly and shook his head. "We really need to watch the discretionary spending, Natalie," he said, leaning against the doorframe of my home office. "With your dad being such a financial drain right now, we need to protect our core assets. My mother relies on our stability. Our stability." He loved using the word our when it came to the money I earned, but quickly reverted to my money when I needed help. "Do not worry, Ryan," I replied, not breaking eye contact with my dual monitors. "My core assets are heavily protected. Your mother will not be affected by my financial decisions." It was the absolute truth, just not in the way he understood it. On the 30th of the month, the tension in the house was palpable, though Ryan remained blissfully ignorant. He spent the evening bragging on the phone to his sister Brittany about a supposed stock tip he had leveraged. Brittany at 30 was a professional socialite who spent more time curating her internet aesthetic than working. She was married to Jamal, an incredibly successful African-American software entrepreneur, but Brittany always acted as if her own family wealth was superior. "Yeah, Britt, the portfolio is looking solid," Ryan boasted loudly from the living room. "Tell Mom the dividends should hit her account by tomorrow morning as usual. Make sure she books that spa weekend." He chuckled loudly, promising her that next quarter would be even more lucrative. I sat in the kitchen sipping my tea, listening to him fabricate an entire financial reality. He was not paying out dividends from a portfolio. He was relying on the automated clearinghouse system of my personal bank account to cover his lies. He had built his entire persona as the wealthy, successful son on the back of my supply chain director salary. I realized then that this was not just about him being selfish regarding my father. This was a deeply rooted pathology. Ryan had weaponized my income to fuel his ego, and the moment I threatened that fuel supply, he discarded my family's crisis as a nuisance. Midnight struck. The first of the month arrived. I logged into my banking app. I checked the ledger. There were no pending transfers. The $3,000 was safely resting in my savings bucket, allocated for the final payment to Dad's contractor. I closed the app, turned off my lamp, and went to sleep. It was the most peaceful night of rest I had experienced since my father's stroke. Ryan snored softly beside me, dreaming of his fake wealth, unaware that the dawn was going to bring a harsh, uncompromising dose of reality. He was fully asleep, completely defenseless against the absolute chaos that awaited him tomorrow. The financial firewall was up, and the flames were about to reach his feet. The morning of the first of the month started like any other Tuesday, but the atmosphere inside our house carried the heavy static charge of an impending storm. Sunlight streamed through the large kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the granite countertops. I woke up early, feeling remarkably refreshed and clear-headed. I brewed a pot of expensive dark roast coffee, poured myself a large mug, and sat at the kitchen island to review a logistics report for work. I was the picture of a focused, unbothered executive. Upstairs, I could hear the steady drumming of water in the master bathroom. Ryan was in the shower, singing softly to himself. He had no idea that his entire financial universe was currently crashing down around him. At exactly 8:15 in the morning, Ryan's phone began to vibrate. He had left it resting on the kitchen counter, right next to the fruit bowl. It buzzed aggressively against the hard stone, a harsh grating sound that completely shattered the morning tranquility. The screen lit up instantly, displaying a name in bold letters. Mom. I did not reach for it. I did not flinch. I just sat there sipping my hot coffee and watched the device dance across the granite. The call went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, the phone started ringing again. Mom. It rang a second time, then a third time. Patricia was clearly not taking no for an answer. When the phone calls went unanswered, the rapid-fire succession of text messages began. The notification banners popped up one after another, illuminating the lock screen with desperate urgency. Ryan had always been incredibly careless with his privacy settings, preferring convenience over security. He always left his message previews fully visible on the lock screen. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on the island, and read the messages as they illuminated the dark glass. Ryan, call me immediately. The transfer did not go through this morning. The bank says there is no pending wire in the system. Ryan, my mortgage auto pay hits today. If this is some sort of bank error, you need to fix it right now. I cannot have a bounced payment on my record. Call your broker. I smiled into my coffee mug. The panic was fully setting in. Patricia was a woman who lived her entire life on a very precarious tightrope of social appearances. To her, missing a mortgage payment was not just a financial issue, it was a profound social death sentence. I watched the screen go dark, highly amused by the chaos I had orchestrated simply by keeping my own money. The shower turned off upstairs. I heard the bathroom door open and the heavy, muffled thud of Ryan's footsteps padding across the hardwood floor of our bedroom. Before he could even make it to the top of the stairs, his phone vibrated again with another loud buzz. This time, the caller ID did not say Mom. It said Brittany. I stood up, walked over to the counter, and looked down at the screen. Brittany was calling twice in rapid succession. When Ryan did not answer, she resorted to texting. The glowing text on the screen laid out a truth that made my blood run instantly cold. Ryan, what on earth is going on? Why is Mom's country club card declining? I tried to book my facial for tomorrow morning, and they said the account is frozen for non-payment. And what about the dividend for my Porsche lease? You promised it would be there today. Jamal is asking questions about the returns. Call me right now before he gets suspicious. I completely froze. The coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. My Porsche lease. I stared at the screen as it went dark again, my mind racing at light speed to process this new horrifying information. I knew about the $3,000 going to Patricia for her mortgage. Ryan had spent 3 years framing it as a dutiful son, helping his elderly, vulnerable mother keep a roof over her head. But Brittany's Porsche lease, a luxury country club membership, a facial. A sickening realization washed over me, heavy and suffocating. I had not just been paying Patricia's mortgage. My $3,000 a month, my late nights at the office, my stressful negotiations with overseas suppliers, my hard-earned corporate bonuses had been funding a luxury lifestyle for his mother and sister. And worse, Brittany's text message explicitly used the word dividend. Ryan was not just secretly giving them my money. He was passing it off as returns from his fictional investment portfolio. He was playing the role of the Wall Street genius, bankrolling his family's elite status, using my paycheck as his personal slush fund to inflate his own ego. He was a fraud. Hey, have you seen my phone? Ryan jogged down the stairs, aggressively toweling his wet hair. He looked hurried, already dressed in his tailored slacks and a crisp white shirt. He smelled of expensive cologne. It is on the counter, I said. My voice was dangerously calm, betraying none of the rage boiling beneath the surface. It has been blowing up for 10 minutes. It looks like your mother and sister are trying to reach you. Ryan lunged across the kitchen for the phone. His eyes darted frantically as he read the backlog of pure panic. The smug aura he carried vanished. It was replaced by visible sweat. Is everything okay? I asked, feigning innocent concern. Ryan swallowed hard. It is fine. Just a banking glitch with my brokerage account. I need to make some calls right now. He did not meet my eyes. He turned around and sprinted down the hallway to his home office, slamming the heavy wooden door shut behind him. I sat alone in the quiet kitchen, completely amazed by the massive disaster I had just silently put into motion. It was only beginning to unfold right before my very eyes. I listened to the muffled sound of Ryan pacing furiously behind his closed office door. His voice was a frantic, low hum, punctuated by sharp, desperate tones, as he presumably tried to pacify his mother and sister. 10 minutes later, the office door flew open. Ryan emerged looking completely frantic, his briefcase clutched tightly in his hand. He did not even glance in my direction as he rushed toward the front door. He mumbled something about a compliance hold requiring his immediate presence at the firm. The heavy front wooden door slammed shut behind him, sending a slight vibration through the floorboards. The sudden silence in the house was deafening. I remained quietly seated at the kitchen island for a long, silent moment. My morning logistics report was entirely forgotten. My gaze drifted to the living room. There, resting innocently on the glass coffee table, was Ryan's personal tablet. In his blind panic to escape the house and fix his collapsing financial facade, he had abandoned his most critical piece of technology. I walked slowly into the living room. The leather of the sofa groaned slightly as I sat down and picked up the device. The screen was cool to the touch. Pressing the home button, the lock screen illuminated, demanding a passcode. Ryan was a creature of immense ego and predictable habits. He used the exact same password for his home security system, his personal laptop, and his tablet. I tapped the glass screen with deliberate precision. Capital RYANBOSS, number 1, Ryan Boss 1. The screen unlocked instantly, revealing a neatly organized grid of applications. My heart pounded against my ribs in an uncomfortable, heavy rhythm. I was no longer just a wife annoyed about a financial disagreement. I was an investigator stepping into a digital crime scene. I opened his email client first. The inbox was cluttered with promotional emails and work correspondence, but I knew exactly what I needed to find. I tapped the search icon and typed the word mortgage. I expected to see monthly statements from Patricia's bank, or perhaps angry automated warnings about late fees. Instead, the search results yielded absolutely nothing related to a property loan in Patricia's name. Frowning, I refined my search query. I typed in the exact street address of his mother's sprawling suburban home. A few results popped up. I scrolled past old online retail delivery confirmations and holiday party invitations until I spotted a document from the county tax assessor's office dated exactly 2 years ago. I tapped the document attachment and pinched the screen to zoom in on the financial details. The document clearly showed the property taxes were paid in full. But more importantly, my eyes locked onto the ownership status section. The assessment officially noted that the property was owned free and clear. There was no mortgage. Patricia had paid off the house 5 years ago with the life insurance payout from Ryan's late father. My breath caught in my throat. For 36 months, I had wired $3,000 of my own money under the explicit guise of keeping a roof over a vulnerable widow's head. Over $100,000 of my hard-earned executive bonuses had been siphoned away for a mortgage that simply did not exist. It was all a calculated predatory fabrication designed exclusively to extort my income. My fingers moved faster now, driven by a cold, clinical fury. I swiped out of the email application and opened his primary banking platform. Like an arrogant fool who believed he was completely untouchable, Ryan had left the Remember Password feature toggled on for his personal checking account. The application bypassed the biometric security check and logged me straight into his financial dashboard. I stared at the main ledger. Ryan's salary from his regional sales manager position was substantial, bringing in nearly $120,000 a year after taxes. But the account balance displayed in bold black numbers at the top of the screen was shockingly low. Barely $4,000 sat in his available checking balance. I pulled up the transaction history for the last 90 days and began scrolling down the page. I was looking for the massive outbound wire transfers to his so-called portfolio. I checked for deposits into Vanguard Fidelity or Charles Schwab accounts. There were absolutely zero transfers to any brokerage firm. His aggressive growth stocks and illiquid capital investments did not exist. He owned no diverse portfolio. The entire narrative he used to justify paying only 40% of our household bills was a complete illusion. Instead, the ledger was a bloodbath of high-end consumerism. A luxury boutique purchase for $12,500. A grand luxury hotel resort stay in Las Vegas for $8,200. An upscale seafood room dinner for $1,400. He was burning through his own salary to maintain the appearance of an elite, untouchable corporate high roller. Then I noticed a recurring pattern of transfers that made my stomach turn entirely. Every single month, precisely one day after my $3,000 hit Patricia's account, Ryan transferred another large chunk of money to his sister. He was bankrolling a fake wealth lifestyle for his entire family. My money paid for Brittany's luxury car leases, Patricia's country club memberships, and the expensive spa weekends they constantly bragged about on social media. Ryan was playing the role of the benevolent, wildly successful son and brother financing their elite status by quietly weaponizing his wife's paycheck. I sat back against the sofa, the tablet resting heavily on my lap. The sheer audacity of his deception was staggering. He had manipulated my empathy, used my father's recent stroke as an excuse to demand financial loyalty, and aggressively protected a system designed solely to fund a mirage. The $3,000 I had just canceled was the only thing keeping his elaborate house of cards from collapsing. I needed more proof. I needed to understand the exact architecture of his lies. I swiped out of his banking application and opened the primary file manager on his tablet. I navigated to his local storage, scrolling past standard work documents and golf swing analysis videos. Near the bottom of the directory, I found a folder plainly titled Wealth Management. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tapped the folder. Inside were neatly organized subfolders categorized by year and quarter. I opened the most recent one labeled Q1 Reports. The directory was filled with PDF documents. I tapped on the first file expecting to see legitimate statements from a recognized brokerage firm. The document opened, displaying the sleek professional logo of a premier private equity group. At first glance, it looked incredibly authentic. The formatting was crisp, and the summary charts looked complex. But as a supply chain director, my entire career revolved around analyzing data and spotting discrepancies. I zoomed in on the balance summary. The numerical font was slightly different from the text font. The alignment on the decimal points was marginally off-center. My eyes darted to the bottom of the page. The obligatory legal disclaimers were present, but the date code at the footer was from 3 years ago. I backed out of the PDF and searched the parent folder again. This time my eyes landed on a subfolder named Templates. I opened it and felt a cold wave of absolute disgust wash over me. Inside were raw, editable document files and graphic design templates. He had literally downloaded generic private equity statements from the internet and was manually typing in fake numbers. I was staring at the undeniable mechanics of active forgery. He was doctoring official financial documents to create a fictional reality. I immediately switched back to his email application to see exactly where these fabricated files were going. I used the search function to filter for attachments matching the fake file names. The search results populated with dozens of emails sent directly to his mother Patricia and his sister Brittany. I opened an email dated exactly 6 months ago. "Hey Mom," Ryan had written. "The market took a slight dip this month due to sector volatility, but my aggressive tech portfolio mitigated the losses entirely. Your $3,000 monthly dividend disbursement has been authorized and dispatched. Go buy something nice for the house. You deserve it." I opened another email, this one sent to Brittany just before her birthday. "The trading algorithm I developed for my personal portfolio is currently outperforming the standard index. I am sending the excess quarterly yield to your account to cover your luxury car lease. Tell your friends your brother is a financial genius. Enjoy the ride, Britt." The sheer, unadulterated audacity was staggering. I sat frozen on the leather sofa and forced myself to recall the exact month that particular email was sent to his sister. It was November. I had worked brutal 80-hour weeks managing a massive overseas shipping crisis. I had skipped meals, lost sleep, and stressed over severe supply chain bottlenecks just to secure my end-of-year executive performance bonus. When that hard-earned bonus finally cleared my account, I transferred the $3,000 to Patricia, genuinely believing I was performing a noble, necessary family duty. Ryan had immediately taken the credit for that exact transfer, rebranding my exhaustion as his own financial triumph. He had effectively stolen my labor, my stress and my success repackaging it in forged documents to buy the endless admiration of his mother and sister. They worshipped him as a financial prodigy, a benevolent patriarch who casually distributed his immense self-made wealth. In reality, he was a parasitic middleman, taking my sweat and slapping his own arrogant name on the transaction. The depth of the betrayal forced a cold, hard knot of pure rage into my chest. This was not a man who had made a simple budgeting error. This was not a husband who had too much pride to ask for help. This was a man operating a sophisticated, premeditated psychological and financial fraud against his own wife. I dug further into the email threads. I noticed that several of the highly doctored PDF reports were also addressed to Jamal. I stared at the name. Jamal was the highly successful software entrepreneur married to Brittany. I remembered Brittany's panicked text message from this morning, the one stating that Jamal was asking questions about the returns. Why would Ryan send fake investment prospectuses to his wealthy brother-in-law? Ryan had always claimed Jamal was just a casual friend he golfed with on weekends. But these emails suggested a highly formal, incredibly dangerous financial relationship. I did not have all the pieces of that specific puzzle yet, but I knew enough to realize Ryan was playing a terrifying game with people who had real money and real lawyers. I realized I could not just leave this explosive evidence sitting on his unsecured device. Ryan could panic, remotely wipe the tablet, or change his passwords at any moment. I opened the web browser, navigated to a secure encrypted cloud storage account I used exclusively for confidential corporate logistics, and logged in. I meticulously began uploading everything. Every single fake PDF, every raw template file, every email thread where he claimed my transfers as his personal dividends. I took screenshots of his barren ledger capturing the amounts he had recklessly blown on designer watches and casino resorts. I worked with precision, leaving no digital footprint behind. I cleared the browser history, fully closed the banking application, and returned the device to the exact angle and position on the glass coffee table where he had abandoned it in his panic. I leaned back into the sofa and took a deep, steadying breath. The illusion of my relationship was completely dead, permanently replaced by the stark, undeniable truth of my horrific situation. I married a con artist. The front door opened at exactly 7 o'clock that evening. Ryan usually walked in with an air of casual dominance, loosening his tie and pouring a drink while complaining about the incompetence of his sales team. Tonight, he moved with the erratic, jerky energy of a cornered animal. He bypassed the bar cart entirely and marched straight into the kitchen where I was preparing a simple salad for dinner. His face was flushed, and a tight vein pulsed visibly in his neck. He slapped his leather briefcase onto the granite counter with unnecessary force. "I need to ask you a question," he demanded, his voice tight and clipped. He was trying to sound authoritative, but I could hear the underlying tremor of pure panic. I continued tossing the mixed greens in the wooden bowl, not bothering to look up. "Go ahead, Ryan. Did you cancel the monthly wire to my mother?" He crossed his arms over his chest, adopting an interrogator stance. "I checked the joint interface today after the compliance hold cleared at my brokerage. The scheduled transfer was completely wiped from the system. I assumed it was a banking error, but the bank representative confirmed the authorized user manually deleted the recurring transaction." I set the salad tongs down gently, wiping my hands on a towel before finally meeting his gaze. My expression was perfectly serene. "Yes, I deleted it. I canceled the transfer this morning while I was at the hospital dealing with my father's medical bills." Ryan stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish suffocating on dry land. The color drained from his flushed face, leaving him pale and splotchy. "You canceled it? Without telling me, Natalie? My mother relies on that money for her mortgage. I already explained to you that my assets are temporarily frozen in high-yield investments. We agreed you would cover the family logistics this month." I leaned against the counter, mirroring his exact posture from the hospital corridor 12 hours earlier. "We did not agree to anything, Ryan. You gave me an ultimatum. You were incredibly clear about how we are going to handle our finances moving forward." He stepped closer, his voice rising in volume. "I told you my mother needs that cash flow to maintain our family stability. You cannot just arbitrarily cut off an elderly woman because you are throwing a tantrum over your dad. I held up a hand, stopping his incoming rant. I am not throwing a tantrum. I am simply following the strict financial boundaries you established this morning. I looked him dead in the eye, delivering the killing blow with icy precision. You told me not to drag your mother into my family's mess. You explicitly said that my parents are my responsibility. You looked me right in the face while my dad was lying in the intensive care unit and told me that your money is yours and my money is mine. So I took my money back. Your mother is your responsibility, Ryan. You need to figure out her mortgage using your own highly successful investment portfolio. Ryan visibly recoiled as if I had physically struck him. The arrogant, controlling sales manager evaporated, leaving behind a terrified con artist realizing his primary funding source had just permanently dried up. "Natalie, please," he stammered, dropping the aggressive posture and attempting a tone of desperate persuasion. "You know my capital is tied up. I cannot liquidate those assets without taking a massive penalty. Brittany is relying on her dividend to pay her car lease. My mother needs the club fees paid. You are going to cause a massive problem for my family." I picked up my salad bowl and a fork. "Then you better start liquidating Ryan. Or perhaps you can explain to your mother and your sister why the brilliant financial genius of the family cannot manage to cover a simple lease payment. My supply chain salary is officially off limits right now." I walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing alone in the deafening silence of his ruined reality. I sat at the dining table taking slow bites of my dinner and listened as the true scrambling began. Ryan retreated to his home office, but he forgot to completely close the door. For the next 2 hours, I was treated to the pathetic soundtrack of a fraudster desperately trying to plug the holes in a sinking ship. First, he called his credit card companies. I heard him pleading with a customer service representative to increase his spending limit on a premium travel card. The request was evidently denied, prompting a frustrated curse. Next, he called a high-interest payday loan company, providing his social security number over the phone in a frantic attempt to secure a quick cash infusion. He needed $3,000 immediately to wire to his mother and appease his sister's demands, but his personal credit was clearly maxed out from funding his secret luxury purchases and endless hotel trips. The most satisfying moment came when his phone rang again. It was Patricia. I heard Ryan pacing heavily across the office floor, his voice cracking as he spun a new web of total lies. "Mom, I promise you the bank is just having an auditing issue with the corporate accounts. The money is there. My investments are generating massive returns this quarter. I am going to sell a few of my vintage golf clubs to a buddy tomorrow just to get you some temporary cash flow until the main wire clears the system. Just tell the club manager the official check is coming." He was selling his custom-forged irons just to buy himself a few days of fake dignity. I finished my dinner, washed my bowl, and went upstairs to sleep. The great wealthy patriarch was reduced to pawning sporting goods, completely unaware that his massive financial nightmare was truly only just beginning to unfold right now. And I knew everything already. The invitation for Friday night dinner arrived under the heavy guise of maternal concern. Patricia called my cell phone on Thursday afternoon, her tone dripping with an artificial, syrupy sweetness that immediately put me on high alert. She claimed she wanted to host a family meal to offer emotional support regarding my father and his recent stroke. I knew better. Patricia did not host dinners out of the goodness of her heart. She hosted dinners to stage an ambush. Ryan practically begged me to attend, desperate to maintain the illusion of our happy marriage in front of his family. I agreed, knowing perfectly well that I was walking straight into a meticulously planned psychological trap. I dressed in a sharp navy blazer and tailored slacks, arming myself with the cold, hard truth I carried in my mind. We pulled into Patricia's sprawling suburban driveway precisely at 7 o'clock. The house was a towering monument to excessive suburban vanity. Perfectly manicured hedges lined the brick walkway and warm light spilled from the oversized bay windows. Ryan hesitated with his hand on the front doorknob, shooting me a nervous, pleading look. He whispered a quick reminder to let him handle any financial talk. I simply smiled and stepped past him, ringing the doorbell myself. Patricia opened the door draped in a cashmere cardigan and wearing her signature string of pearls. She pulled me into a stiff, performative hug, her perfume smelling sharply of expensive roses and hidden resentment. The dining room table was already set with fine china and crystal wine glasses. Brittany was lounging on the velvet sofa in the living room, aggressively tapping the screen of her latest smartphone. She barely looked up when we entered, muttering a quick hello, before complaining loudly about a delayed shipment of designer shoes. Sitting in the leather armchair across from her was her husband, Jamal. Jamal was a 32-year-old African-American software entrepreneur who had built and sold his first tech startup before he turned 30. He was sharp, observant, and possessed a quiet, grounded confidence that completely contrasted with the loud, frantic energy of Ryan's family. Jamal was also the only person in this entire house who had ever treated me with genuine, uncalculated kindness. Jamal stood up immediately when he saw me offering a warm, authentic hug. He asked about my father with real concern in his eyes, inquiring about the rehabilitation timeline and how I was holding up balancing my supply chain director duties with the hospital visits. It was a stark contrast to Ryan, who had immediately headed for the liquor cabinet to pour himself a stiff drink. I answered Jamal, honestly grateful for a brief moment of sanity in a house built on financial delusions. Jamal mentioned his new software venture was expanding rapidly, which made Ryan flinch slightly by the bar cart. The dynamic between them was fascinating to observe now that I knew the truth. Jamal looked at Ryan with the relaxed trust of a successful investor, while Ryan looked back with the terrified, cornered eyes of a desperate fraudster owing a massive debt. Patricia ushered us into the formal dining room. The meal consisted of an expensive catered roast which Patricia naturally tried to pass off as her own culinary creation. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation hovered around safe, superficial topics. Brittany complained about the poor service at her luxury gym, and Patricia lamented the rising costs of her weekly floral deliveries. I ate my dinner silently, waiting for the inevitable pivot. It happened right as Patricia began slicing the dessert cake. She set the silver cake knife down and looked directly at me across the polished mahogany table. Her eyes narrowed into a familiar, calculating squint. "Natalie, dear," Patricia began, her voice echoing loudly in the dining room. "Ryan tells me you have been dealing with a lot of stress lately regarding your father. We are all very sympathetic, of course, but I do worry about the toll it is taking on Ryan. He is working so hard to manage his vast investment portfolio and keep this family secure. It must be terribly difficult for him to handle his complex financial responsibilities while also managing a wife who is being uncooperative." I set my fork down on the china plate. The porcelain clinked sharply in the sudden quiet of the room. "Uncooperative," I repeated, keeping my voice perfectly level. Patricia sighed dramatically, placing a hand over her heart. "Well, yes. Marriage is a partnership, Natalie. When Ryan is carrying the heavy burden of generating wealth for everyone, a good wife should be a pillar of unwavering support. Withholding your contributions to the family ecosystem just because you are having a personal crisis is highly concerning. A truly supportive partner would not act like such a selfish daughter-in-law. She would understand that family obligations must be maintained at all costs." The sheer audacity of her statement hung heavy in the air. She sat in a house paid for by her late husband's life insurance, eating a catered meal while actively scolding me for not continuing to fund her luxurious lifestyle with my hard-earned executive bonuses. She genuinely believed Ryan was a Wall Street genius, and that my refusal to hand over $3,000 was a petty, spiteful act of domestic rebellion. Brittany nodded along with her mother, swirling her wine glass, and adding that her own stress levels were peaking because Ryan's dividend payment was mysteriously delayed this month. I looked at Ryan. He was staring intensely at his half-eaten slice of cake, absolutely refusing to make eye contact with me. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. He had clearly spun a massive lie to explain the missing money, likely telling them I was holding his accounts hostage or demanding unreasonable financial control over his business assets. I looked at Jamal, who was watching the entire exchange with a highly analytical, confused frown. He knew the math was failing. He knew his brother-in-law was operating a deeply flawed, unsustainable system. The silence stretched just long enough to become agonizing before Ryan finally looked up from his dessert. He cleared his throat, adjusting his collar with a feigned air of weary patience. He was about to perform to sacrifice my reputation completely to save his own skin. "Mom, please try to understand," Ryan said, using his best corporate placation voice. "Natalie is just struggling with basic financial management right now. When her father had his stroke, she completely panicked. She did not have an emergency contingency fund in place, and her lack of preparation created a massive liquidity crisis for her family. I had to step in and restructure our entire household budget to prevent them from facing total ruin." I sat perfectly still, my hands resting lightly on my lap. The sheer velocity of his lie was almost impressive. He was not just covering up the missing $3,000. He was actively rewriting history, painting himself as the wealthy, benevolent savior who had swooped in to rescue my destitute family from my own gross incompetence. Patricia gasped, pressing a hand to her pearls, as if she had just witnessed a tragedy. "Ryan, you had to divert your investment capital to fix her mistakes." Ryan nodded solemnly, looking down with a practiced expression of noble sacrifice. "Yes, Mom. I had to initiate a temporary freeze on my aggressive growth portfolio. I diverted a significant portion of my working capital to cover the costs of retrofitting her father's house. The wheelchair ramps, the medical bills, all of it required immediate cash. Because her funds were tied up in poorly managed accounts, I had to take the hit. That is why your dividend was delayed this month, Brittany. Natalie's financial mismanagement forced my hand. I am basically bailing her out." Brittany let out a loud, dramatic scoff, crossing her arms and glaring at me from across the table. "So let me get this straight," she snapped. "My Porsche lease is late, and I have to cancel my spa weekend, all because you could not bother to set up a proper savings account for your dad. That is entirely unfair, Natalie. Ryan works incredibly hard to generate our returns. You should not be bleeding his business dry just because you failed to plan ahead." I looked from Brittany to Ryan. Ryan refused to meet my gaze, keeping his eyes firmly fixed on his mother, basking in the warm, approving glow of her admiration. "You are too good to her, Ryan," Patricia said, reaching over to pat his hand. "You truly are the pillar of this family. But Natalie, you need to understand that Ryan's investments are the lifeblood of our security. You cannot expect him to jeopardize his massive tech portfolio every time your side of the family faces a minor setback. You need to be more disciplined. You should be down on your knees thanking him for liquidating his assets to save your father." Thanking him. I was listening to a woman tell me I should worship the man who is currently stealing my executive salary to pay for her country club membership. The psychological warfare was staggering, but it gave me a massive tactical advantage. By publicly claiming he had liquidated his assets to fund my father's house, Ryan was digging a legal grave so deep he would never climb out. I glanced over at Jamal. The software entrepreneur was leaning back in his chair, his arms crossed, his eyes darting between Ryan and me. Jamal was a man who built his wealth on algorithms, pure data, and undeniable facts. He knew the cost of a wheelchair ramp did not require freezing an entire venture capital portfolio. Ryan Jamal said, his deep voice slicing through the dining room chatter. "You are saying you froze your portfolio to cover a $15,000 medical renovation." Ryan stiffened. His relaxed, noble posture instantly rigidified. Jamal was not Patricia. Jamal could not be dazzled by vague Wall Street buzzwords. It was not just the renovation, Ryan stammered, attempting to recover his smooth delivery. It was a compounding liquidity issue. I had to shift several moving parts to ensure Natalie's dad was fully covered without triggering massive capital gains taxes on my end. It created a temporary cash flow squeeze. Jamal tilted his head, his expression unreadable, but intensely focused. "A cash flow squeeze. So what exactly does that mean for the seed funds I parked with you? Are my assets currently frozen to pay for your father-in-law's bathroom remodel?" The temperature in the room plummeted. Patricia and Brittany looked back and forth between the two men, confused by the sudden shift in tone. They thought this was a conversation about my failures as a wife. They did not realize this was a high-stakes interrogation between an investor and a fraudster. No, absolutely not. Ryan shot back, his voice rising a frantic octave. Your capital is entirely ring-fenced. Your money is locked into the algorithmic trading model I showed you last quarter. I only shifted my personal discretionary funds. Your returns are completely safe, Jamal. The dividend distribution was just caught in the crossfire of the banking audit I triggered when I moved my own money around for Natalie. It is an administrative delay, nothing more. Ryan wiped his forehead with his napkin. He was throwing me completely under the bus, using my supposed incompetence as a human shield against a federal wire fraud investigation. He was telling Jamal that my selfish demands had merely caused a paperwork backlog. I watched Jamal process this information. He looked at Ryan's sweating face, then looked at me. I did not break character. I did not scream that Ryan was a liar. I did not announce that I had paid for the renovations myself using my supply chain director bonuses. I simply sat there absorbing the blame, allowing Ryan to spin his web of deceit tighter and tighter. Every lie he told in front of these witnesses was another piece of evidence I would soon use. Patricia took a long sip of her wine, clearly emboldened by Ryan's fabricated defense. She set the crystal glass down and glared at me with absolute contempt. You see, Natalie, Patricia said, her voice echoing in the quiet dining room. This is exactly what I mean. You are entirely reckless. You jeopardize this family with your lack of foresight, and my son has to play the hero to clean up your mess. You should be apologizing to him. You should be begging for his forgiveness for causing such a massive disruption to his business. Brittany scoffed loudly, crossing her arms over her silk blouse. Honestly, if I were Ryan, I would have let you figure it out yourself. You have a corporate job, Natalie. Why could not you just take out a personal loan? Why does my brother always have to be your safety net? It is completely unfair that my lifestyle gets penalized for your dad's bathroom. I looked around the table. Jamal remained silent, his eyes locked onto my face. He was waiting for my reaction. He knew something was fundamentally wrong with Ryan's narrative, but he needed to see how I would play my hand. Ryan sat up straighter, adjusting his suit jacket, wearing the proud, martyred expression of a man who had successfully convinced his audience of his ultimate superiority. He expected me to explode. He wanted me to yell, to call him a liar, to throw a tantrum so he could point a finger and call me unstable. I refused to give him that satisfaction. Instead, I folded my napkin, placed it neatly next to my plate, and offered a soft, genuine smile. You know what I said, my voice perfectly clear and entirely devoid of anger. You are all absolutely right. The entire table froze. Ryan's smug expression faltered, a flicker of genuine confusion crossing his features. Patricia blinked rapidly, entirely unprepared for my sudden agreement. I have been terribly irresponsible. I continued, leaning forward slightly to address the whole room. I completely panicked when my father had his stroke. I let my emotions cloud my judgment, and I failed to manage my own finances properly. I forced Ryan to step in and fix my mess. It was incredibly selfish of me to put that burden on his investment portfolio. Natalie, Ryan warned, his voice low and cautious. You do not have to do this right now. No, Ryan, I do, I insisted, projecting a tone of profound admiration. Your mother and your sister are entirely correct. I need to acknowledge your financial genius. You navigated a massive liquidity crisis for my family without hesitation. You are a true Wall Street talent. I clearly lack the discipline to handle major financial obligations. I turned to look directly into Patricia's triumphant eyes. In fact, this whole situation has been a massive wake-up call for me. I realize now that keeping our finances separate was a terrible mistake on my part. I should never have tried to manage my own money. Ryan is clearly the expert. So effective, immediately, I am stepping back. Ryan's face drained of all color. His eyes went wide with sudden, unadulterated terror. Stepping back. What exactly does that mean, Natalie? It means I am taking your advice, darling. I smiled warmly at him. I am completely relinquishing control. I am transferring all of my household financial responsibilities directly over to you. The mortgage on my house, the property taxes, the utility bills, the grocery budget, And the remaining contractor invoices for my dad's house, I am handing all of it over to your capable hands. Wait, no. Ryan stammered, his voice cracking noticeably. We agreed to keep things separate. You cannot just dump everything on me. Why not? I asked with innocent wide eyes. You just told everyone how brilliantly you managed to shift your working capital to save my family. You told Jamal your aggressive tech portfolio is outperforming the index. You are a master at generating massive returns. Why should I struggle to pay the electric bill with my meager supply chain salary when you have such an expansive, highly successful enterprise? It makes perfect sense for you to be the sole provider. You are the pillar of this family, right? Brittany clapped her hands together, entirely oblivious to the catastrophic reality of my words. Finally. It is about time you let a real man handle the accounts. Ryan has always been the smart one. Patricia nodded vigorously, raising her wine glass. This is exactly what I have been saying from the start. A wife should trust her husband's financial leadership. You are finally making a sensible decision, Natalie. Ryan looked like he was about to vomit. He gripped the edge of the mahogany dining table so hard his knuckles turned completely white. His chest heaved as he struggled to pull oxygen into his lungs. He was trapped. He could not refuse my offer without admitting his portfolio was a total fabrication. He could not accept my offer because his checking account literally held less than $4,000, and the monthly expenses I had just dumped on him exceeded $10,000. Natalie, be reasonable, Ryan gasped, sweat now visibly dripping down his neck. My capital is tied up in algorithmic trades. I cannot just suddenly take on all your overhead. It will disrupt my entire quarterly strategy. You need to keep paying your share. Nonsense, Jamal interjected, his voice carrying dark, calculated amusement. Jamal leaned forward, resting on the table. Ryan is a prodigy, Natalie. He just assured me my seed capital is perfectly safe and generating an 8% return. A guy with that kind of liquidity can absolutely cover a few utility bills and a mortgage. Right, Ryan. You are not running a fragile operation, are you? Ryan swallowed very loudly. He stared blankly at Jamal, then at his mother, then at me. We had completely boxed him into a very tight, dark, inescapable corner. The rest of the dinner passed in a state of agonizing suspension for Ryan. He barely spoke another word, pushing his ruined dessert around his plate, while Patricia and Brittany continued to praise his fictional financial dominance. Jamal did not press the issue further at the table, but the silent, calculating weight of his gaze never left my husband. When we finally excused ourselves and drove home, the silence in the car was absolute. Ryan gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were bone white. He was terrified to speak, knowing that any word he uttered would either confirm his fraud or require him to accept the massive financial burden I had just publicly handed him. I simply looked out the passenger window, feeling the cool night air seep through the glass, entirely at peace. The very next morning, my phone buzzed while I was reviewing a quarterly shipping manifesto in my office. I glanced at the screen, expecting a panicked text from Ryan attempting to negotiate my household takeover. Instead, the name on the caller ID made my pulse jump. It was a direct text from Jamal. Natalie, we need to talk. Just the two of us. Do not tell Ryan. I have a 30-minute window at noon. Meet me at the roasting company on Fifth Avenue. I stared at the message. Jamal was a man who valued efficiency and direct communication. He did not send cryptic texts unless the situation was highly volatile. I typed a quick confirmation, grabbed my blazer, and left the office early. The roasting company was a sleek industrial coffee shop located several miles away from our usual suburban haunts. It was the perfect place for a discreet meeting. When I walked through the glass doors, the smell of roasted espresso beans hit me instantly. Jamal was already seated in a secluded corner booth nursing a black coffee. He wore a sharp charcoal suit, but his usual relaxed, confident demeanor was completely gone. He looked intense, his dark eyes analyzing me the moment I stepped into his line of sight. I sat down across from him, placing my purse on the empty chair. We bypassed the standard pleasantries entirely. Thank you for coming, Jamal said, keeping his voice low enough to avoid the attention of the nearby tables. I will get straight to the point, Natalie. I need you to be completely honest with me. What exactly is going on with Ryan's investment firm? I kept my expression neutral, buying myself a fraction of a second to gauge his angle. What do you mean, Jamal? He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the wooden table. I mean, the math from last night does not compute. Ryan claimed he initiated a temporary freeze on his aggressive growth portfolio to cover your father's medical expenses. He claimed the dividend delay was caused by a banking audit triggered by moving his own capital. But the way he reacted when you offered to hand over your household bills, that was not the reaction of a man experiencing a temporary cash flow squeeze. That was the reaction of a man who is completely broke. I took a slow breath, realizing Jamal was already halfway to the truth. I have been in venture capital for 10 years. Jamal continued, his tone turning sharp and clinical. I know what a compliance hold looks like. I know how algorithmic trading portfolios operate. Ryan was sweating through his suit over a few $1,000s in utility bills. A man generating the kind of returns he claims to be generating does not panic over a mortgage payment. So I am asking you directly as his wife. Is Ryan's firm freezing assets? Is he facing insolvency? I looked at Jamal, weighing the immense risk of my next move. I was sitting across from a man who had handed my husband $150,000 of his own hard-earned seed capital. If I told Jamal the truth, the absolute unfiltered reality of Ryan's deception, I would be initiating a nuclear detonation that would destroy my marriage, bankrupt my mother-in-law, and potentially send my husband to federal prison. But Ryan had already pulled the pin on that grenade the moment he told me my father's stroke was my problem. He had drawn the battle lines. I was merely stepping onto the field he had prepared. Jamal, I said, keeping my voice incredibly steady. You are asking the wrong questions. You are asking if his firm is freezing assets. You should be asking if his firm actually exists. Jamal froze. The busy background noise of the coffee shop seemed to completely drop away. His eyes narrowed, a cold, hard light flashing in them. Explain that to me, he demanded softly. Ryan does not have an aggressive growth portfolio, I stated, laying the facts bare on the table. He is a regional sales manager. He makes a good salary, but he does not manage private equity. He does not run algorithmic trades. Every single luxury purchase he makes, the watches, the hotel stays, the expensive dinners, is funded by his base salary. And the monthly financial support he provides to Patricia and Brittany, the country club fees, the luxury car leases, those are not paid by his investments. Where is the money coming from? Jamal asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous low octave. From me, I answered, maintaining unwavering eye contact. For the last 3 years, I have been wiring $3,000 of my executive bonuses to his mother on the first of every single month. Ryan took credit for my money. He repackaged my salary as his own investment dividends to look like a financial genius to his family. When my dad had his stroke 2 weeks ago, I needed that cash to pay for his medical retrofitting. I canceled the monthly wire to Patricia. That is why Brittany's car payment bounced. That is why Patricia's club card declined. There was no banking audit. There was no compliance hold. I simply stopped paying their bills. Jamal sat back in his chair, processing the massive scale of the deception. The implication was hitting him exactly as I knew it would. If my salary was paying for the family's lifestyle, then his money was unaccounted for. Natalie, Jamal said, his jaw tight. I transferred $150,000 into a secondary LLC account Ryan provided me. He sent me quarterly prospectus reports. He sent me detailed breakdown sheets of my yields. I know, I replied. I saw the emails on his tablet last night. Jamal, I found the raw templates. He downloaded generic private equity forms from the internet and typed the numbers in himself. He has been taking your money and using my salary to pay your fake returns so you would not get suspicious. Jamal closed his eyes, inhaling a long, deep breath as the reality of the federal wire fraud settled over him. When he opened his eyes again, the friendly brother-in-law was entirely gone. He was replaced by a ruthless software entrepreneur who had just discovered a massive theft. Do you have proof? He asked. I have everything I promised, and we are going to burn him to the ground. Jamal did not blink. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement that signaled the official formation of our alliance. He pulled his smartphone from his inner jacket pocket and placed it face down on the table, a physical manifestation of his complete focus. Walk me through the timeline. Jamal said, his voice dropping into the clinical interrogative register of a man who conducted hostile corporate takeovers for a living. I need to know exactly how he structured the cash flow. Because if he is using your paycheck to cover the yield on my principal, we are not just dealing with a liar. We are looking at a textbook Ponzi scheme. I leaned in closer over the small wooden table. 3 years ago, Ryan told me he was tying up his commissions in long-term tech investments. He convinced me that because my supply chain director's salary was stable and substantial, I needed to cover the majority of our household overhead. Then he guilted me into sending his mother $3,000 every month. He claimed her pension was failing to cover her mortgage. Jamal's jaw tightened. And you just found out the house is fully paid off. Free and clear for 5 years, I confirmed. There is no mortgage. I checked the county tax records last night. But here is the critical part, Jamal. I set up an automated clearinghouse transfer. Every single month on the first, my bank pushed $3,000 to Patricia's account. Ryan knew exactly when that money would land. Jamal picked up his coffee cup, his knuckles white against the ceramic. He pitched me the algorithmic trading model exactly 2.5 years ago. It was right after he supposedly got a massive promotion. He brought over a polished prospectus. He claimed he had proprietary access to a quantitative trading bot developed by a former college roommate. He said it was highly exclusive, capped at a few investors, but he could slide me in because we were family. And you gave him $150,000, I said, feeling a fresh wave of disgust at my husband's absolute lack of morality. I transferred the seed capital in a single wire. Jamal stated, his eyes dark with suppressed fury. I am usually incredibly cautious with angel investments. I require extensive auditing. But Ryan played the family card flawlessly. Brittany begged me to support her brother. Patricia cornered me at Thanksgiving and talked about how Ryan was a financial prodigy just waiting for the right backing. I bypassed my own security protocols to keep the peace in my marriage. I shook my head, marveling at the sheer scale of the manipulation. They enabled him. They built him up as this untouchable genius, and he used their blind adoration to rob you. He promised a guaranteed 8% quarterly return. Jamal continued mapping out the architecture of the fraud. That is aggressive, but not impossible in quantitative trading. I told him I did not want liquid payouts. I told him to automatically reinvest the quarterly yields to compound the principal. But 6 months ago, Brittany started complaining about wanting the new Porsche Macan. I told her I was not pulling capital from my active software projects to fund a luxury vehicle lease. I saw the pieces snapping into place before Jamal even finished his sentence. So Ryan swooped in to play the hero. Exactly, Jamal said bitterly. Ryan called me. He said his algorithm was outperforming the market. He offered to siphon off a flat $3,000 monthly dividend from my generated returns and route it directly to Brittany to cover the Porsche lease and her premium club memberships. He framed it as a seamless solution. My principal would continue to grow, and my wife would get her luxury car without touching my primary business accounts. We sat in silence for a long moment as the horrific, undeniable reality of the math settled over the table. Ryan was running a closed-loop parasitic financial engine. He never invested your money, I said, spelling out the cold, hard facts. He took your $150,000 and immediately started bleeding it dry. He bought a Rolex. He booked luxury suites in Las Vegas. He ate at premium seafood restaurants. He funded the illusion of a high-rolling executive. And to keep me from auditing the account or pulling my principal, Jamal added finishing the equation he needed to deliver that $3,000 monthly dividend to Brittany. He needed to prove the investment was generating cash, but he had already blown your seed money, I said. He had zero liquidity, so he used my money. The entire miniature Ponzi scheme was now perfectly illuminated in the harsh light of day. On the first of every month, my hard-earned executive bonus dropped into Patricia's account. Ryan immediately took credit for the influx of cash. He likely instructed Patricia to route a portion of it to Brittany, branding it as the lucrative dividend from Jamal's brilliant investment. Patricia kept whatever was left to fund her own country club lifestyle, believing her golden child was simply distributing his massive Wall Street wealth. Ryan was standing in the middle, a fraudulent conductor directing a symphony of stolen money. He was keeping his mother, his sister, and his wealthy brother-in-law completely pacified, using the sweat from my 80-hour work weeks. When you canceled your automatic transfer yesterday, Jamal said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. The music stopped. The fresh capital ceased flowing into the system. He could not pay Brittany her car lease money. He could not cover Patricia's club fees. The bottom fell out of his entire operation. He is completely insolvent, I confirmed. I saw his personal checking ledger. He has less than $4,000 to his name. Your $150,000 is gone, Jamal. He burned through it to buy the respect of a family that already worshipped him. Jamal leaned back against the leather booth. The anger radiating from him was palpable, a dense, heavy energy that promised absolute destruction. He was a man who built empires on code and logic, and he had just been swindled by a man who downloaded fake PDF templates from the internet. He thought he was so smart, Jamal murmured, staring at the wall behind me. He thought he could juggle my money and your salary forever. He really believed we would never compare notes. He relies on his family's absolute refusal to question him, I said. Patricia and Brittany would never ask to see actual bank statements. They just wanted the cash to keep flowing. He assumed I would always act the part of the compliant, financially responsible wife. He fundamentally underestimated both of us. Jamal picked up his phone. He unlocked the screen and opened his contacts. You said you uploaded the forged prospectus templates and his bank ledgers to a secure cloud server. I have everything completely locked down, I assured him. High-resolution screenshots of his depleted accounts, the raw editable files he used to fake your quarterly reports, and the email threads where he explicitly claims my transfers as his investment yields. Send the encrypted folder link to my personal email right now, Jamal commanded softly. I am contacting my corporate litigation team. We are not just going to divorce him or cut him off, Natalie. We are going to initiate a catastrophic legal strike. I pulled my phone from my purse, opened the secure application, and generated the decryption key. With a quick tap, I forwarded the access link directly to the private email address Jamal had provided. He watched his screen intently. A moment later, his device illuminated with the notification. He opened the folder, swiping through the high-resolution screenshots of Ryan's barren bank ledger and the blatantly forged private equity prospectuses. I watched Jamal's jaw clench as he verified the digital evidence. He was a man accustomed to reviewing complex financial audits, and identifying the crude manipulation in Ryan's fake documents took him less than 10 seconds. This is federal wire fraud, Jamal stated, his voice a low, lethal murmur. He looked up from the screen, his dark eyes locking onto mine. He used electronic communications to solicit funds across state lines under false pretenses. He fabricated investment vehicles, forged financial instruments, and transmitted those fraudulent documents via email to maintain the deception. Every single time he hit send on those fake quarterly reports, he committed another federal offense. My legal team is going to absolutely dissect him in a courtroom. I need to pull my own banking records to establish the other half of the money trail, I replied, matching his clinical tone. I will download 36 months of transaction histories, showing the exact dates and times my $3,000 bonuses hit Patricia's account. We can map those timestamps directly against the dates Ryan sent those emails to Brittany, claiming he was distributing your dividends. The synchronization will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was cycling my salary to cover his theft of your principal capital. Jamal nodded in agreement, his analytical mind already processing the litigation strategy. The timeline is our most devastating weapon. We will build an irrefutable chronological map of the entire operation. My lawyers will subpoena his actual bank records during the discovery phase, but the files you secured from his tablet give us the necessary leverage to file the initial civil and criminal complaints. We just need to make sure he does not realize we are building a case against him. If he senses we are collaborating, he might try to destroy the original files on his devices or attempt to flee the jurisdiction. He will not suspect a thing, I assured him. He is far too arrogant to believe we would ever speak privately. He relies entirely on his family's toxic dynamic to keep everyone isolated and strictly loyal to his narrative. He assumes I am just a bitter wife holding a grudge about my father's medical bills, and he assumes you are just an aloof investor who trusts his brother-in-law implicitly. We will use his arrogance against him. I will go home tonight and play the role of the submissive, oblivious spouse. I will let him think his gaslighting at dinner actually worked. And what about Brittany? I asked, leaning forward across the small table. She was complaining loudly about her delayed car payment last night. If Ryan fails to produce her fake dividend this week, she might push him into a corner and demand answers. We cannot have her blowing up the situation before your lawyers are ready to strike. Jamal took a slow sip of his coffee. His expression was completely unreadable, a mask of pure corporate discipline. I will handle Brittany. I will transfer $3,000 from my personal checking account into her luxury spending account this evening. I will tell her I am covering the Porsche lease this month because Ryan warned me about a temporary banking audit affecting his distributions. It will keep her perfectly quiet and oblivious, and it will give Ryan a false sense of security. He will think he dodged a bullet. He will believe his lie about the compliance hold actually bought him enough time to figure out a new scam. It was a brilliant, ruthless maneuver. Jamal was willing to burn $3,000 of his own cash just to keep the target completely stationary while we armed the warhead. We spent the next 45 minutes establishing a secure communication protocol. We agreed not to text or call each other on our primary cell phone numbers. Instead, Jamal set up a temporary encrypted messaging application on a secondary device he kept for international business travel. We would use that secure channel to share bank statements, coordinate timelines, and finalize the legal strategy without leaving any trace on our daily networks. Before we stood up to leave the roasting company, Jamal reached across the wooden table. I want to thank you, Natalie. Most people would have just quietly filed for divorce and walked away to avoid the collateral damage. Most people would not have the courage to dig into the fraud and expose the entire operation. You saved me from pouring more capital into his fake fund next quarter. I am not doing this just to be a good Samaritan, Jamal, I replied honestly. He looked me dead in the eye in a hospital hallway and told me my family was my problem. He tried to use my father's stroke as an opportunity to reinforce his control over my finances. He built his entire persona on my exhaustion. We are going to strip him of everything he values: his money, his reputation, and his absolute freedom. Jamal stood up, buttoning his charcoal suit jacket. We are entirely on the same page. Go home. Play the part. Let him think he is the smartest man in the room. My litigation team will have the initial filings drafted by the end of the week. I will send you a secure message when the trap is fully armed. I watched Jamal walk confidently out of the coffee shop, his posture radiating absolute authority and power. I remained in the booth for a few quiet minutes longer, finishing my drink and mentally preparing for the performance ahead. I had to return to my house and face a man who was actively destroying my life, and I had to do it with a pleasant smile. The silent alliance was officially forged. We had the motive, we had the digital evidence, and we had the financial resources to execute a flawless, catastrophic takedown. Ryan was a dead man walking. He just did not know it was happening yet. I returned to the house that afternoon with a perfectly rehearsed smile and a renewed sense of purpose. When Ryan walked through the front door a few hours later, the crushing panic that had gripped him at the dining table seemed to have completely vanished. He whistled a cheerful tune as he dropped his keys into the ceramic bowl by the entryway. Jamal had clearly executed his part of our strategy flawlessly. By transferring the $3,000 to Brittany and playing the role of the understanding investor, Jamal had given my husband a massive, entirely false sense of security. Ryan genuinely believed his pathetic lie about a banking compliance hold had worked. He thought he had successfully pacified his wealthy brother-in-law and bought himself enough time to figure out his next grift. I knew the reality of his situation. His bank account was practically empty. The monthly cash flow he relied on to fund his mother's luxury lifestyle was permanently severed. He was sitting on a ticking time bomb of $150,000 in stolen seed capital, and the temporary reprieve Jamal had granted him was merely a stay of execution. Ryan was desperate, and desperate men always make catastrophic mistakes. I did not have to wait long for him to make his move. Exactly 3 days after our dinner at Patricia's house, Ryan came home early from the office. He burst into the kitchen with an unnatural, manic energy. His eyes were wide and his movements were jerky and exaggerated. He carried a thick manila folder under his arm, slapping it down onto the granite island with a loud theatrical smack. I was standing at the stove stirring a simmering pot of marinara sauce, and I watched him perform his carefully scripted routine. Natalie. I have incredible news, Ryan announced, loosening his tie and flashing a brilliant, entirely predatory smile. I have spent the last 48 hours running diagnostics on my trading algorithm, and it has identified a massive market inefficiency in the emerging tech sector. The projected returns are astronomical. We are talking about a generational wealth-building opportunity. I turned off the burner and wiped my hands on a dish towel. That sounds exciting, Ryan. It is beyond exciting, he insisted, pacing back and forth across the kitchen floor. But there is a catch. The window to execute this trade is incredibly narrow. The market is going to correct itself within days. I need to move massive amounts of liquidity to capitalize on this. But as you know, my primary capital is currently locked up in those long-term holds I mentioned at dinner. He paused, leaning heavily against the island and locking his gaze onto mine. He was trying to project an aura of intense, commanding partnership. He wanted me to feel like I was being invited into a highly exclusive, highly lucrative inner circle. I need working capital, Natalie, he stated, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I need a rapid cash infusion to execute the trades, and I figured out exactly how we can do it together. He opened the manila folder and slid a thick stack of crisp, densely printed documents across the granite countertop. The bold black letters at the top of the first page were unmistakable. It was a home equity line of credit application. I stared at the paperwork, fighting the sudden urge to laugh in his face. He was actually doing it. He was attempting to mortgage my premarital asset. The house we lived in was purchased entirely by me 2 years before I even met him. The deed was exclusively in my name, and the equity I had built was substantial. Ryan had contributed absolutely nothing to the down payment or the monthly mortgage, yet here he was presenting a bank document designed to extract $100,000 of my hard-earned equity. Ryan tapped the paperwork eagerly. I already spoke to a loan officer at a private bank. Because the house is in your name, you have to be the primary signatory on the paperwork. But do not worry about the monthly repayments. My algorithm will generate enough profit in the first 30 days to pay off the entire credit line, plus leave us with a massive surplus. This is how the wealthy leverage their assets, Natalie. We use the debt equity sitting in these walls to generate active compounding cash flow to boost my portfolio. I looked from the documents to his flushed, desperate face. Ryan, this is a massive financial commitment. You are asking me to borrow against my home. Our home, he corrected sharply, his friendly facade slipping for just a fraction of a second to reveal the controlling monster underneath. This is about building our future. I am trying to build an empire for us. I took the hit for your family when your dad had his stroke. I restructured my entire portfolio to save you from your own financial mismanagement. Now I am asking you to step up and be a real partner. He was weaponizing the lie he had told at his mother's dining table, using his fake act of heroism to guilt me into handing over a massive sum of cash. He did not want to invest my equity in the tech sector. He needed $100,000 to pay back Jamal, pacify his mother, and keep himself out of federal prison. He was trying to steal my house to cover his massive fraud. When I remained silent, feigning shock and hesitation, Ryan escalated his psychological attack. He walked around the island and gripped my shoulders, digging his fingers into my fabric. Natalie, we are at a crossroads, he said, his voice dripping with manipulative sincerity. You completely undermined me at the hospital. You cut off my mother's support out of pure spite. I forgave you for that because I love you. But I cannot build a life with a woman who refuses to trust my financial leadership. If you do not sign this paperwork, you are actively sabotaging our financial empire to prove a point. You are proving that you do not believe in this marriage and you do not believe in our future. I looked down at the documents. The signature line at the bottom of the page seemed to glow under the kitchen pendant lights. He was giving me an ultimatum wrapped in a threat. He was demanding that I literally sign my property over to him to prove my loyalty. If I refused, he would claim I was a terrible, unsupportive wife and use it to initiate a chaotic, messy divorce where he would undoubtedly try to claim half my assets anyway to pay off his massive debts. I reached out and gently traced the edge of the paper with my index finger, putting on the performance of a lifetime. I let my shoulders slump, projecting the exact image of a defeated, overwhelmed woman who was ready to surrender to her dominant husband. I picked up the pen resting next to the folder and held it over the signature line, feeling Ryan's intense, predatory gaze tracking my every movement. He was so close to his salvation, holding his breath as he waited for me to blindly sign away my ultimate security. I let the tip of the expensive silver pen hover a fraction of an inch above the crisp white paper. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. I could hear Ryan breathing. It was shallow, ragged, and desperate. He leaned in closer, his shadow falling across the documents. The bold logo of the private bank mocked me from the top of the page. This was a $100,000 anchor he was trying to tie around my neck. I pulled the pen back slowly, letting my hand tremble just enough to be noticeable. "Ryan," I said, making my voice sound incredibly small and uncertain. "This is an enormous amount of money against the house. It is a massive lien on the only property I own. I just need to read the terms." The veneer of the benevolent financial genius vanished completely. Ryan slammed his hand flat against the granite countertop, making me physically jump. "Are you absolutely kidding me right now?" he shouted. His face contorted into an ugly mask of pure rage. He abandoned the persuasive investor persona and shifted immediately into aggressive, unhinged domestic coercion. The transition was terrifyingly seamless. "After absolutely everything I have done to save your family from total bankruptcy, you are going to nickel and dime me over standard paperwork," Ryan demanded. "I bailed you out. I protected my mother when you selfishly cut her off, and now you refuse to back my investments. If you do not sign this document today, we are done, Natalie. I mean it. I will contact my lawyer tomorrow and file for divorce. I refuse to remain shackled to a woman who actively sabotages my wealth out of pure paranoia and selfishness. You are destroying this marriage." Inside, I was secretly cheering. He had just handed me the exact threat I needed him to vocalize. He was the one bringing up divorce, establishing a documented pattern of financial coercion and emotional abuse. Outside, I began my performance. I let my lower lip quiver. I forced a heavy, jagged breath into my lungs and allowed my eyes to fill with tears. I dropped the pen onto the granite. It landed with a hollow clatter that echoed in the quiet kitchen. I wrapped my arms tightly around my torso, making myself look completely broken and defeated. "Ryan, please," I sobbed, letting the tears spill over my eyelashes and run down my cheeks. "Please do not ever say that. You know I love you. You know I want us to build an empire together. I am just so overwhelmed right now. The hospital bills, my dad coming home, the new project launch at work. My brain is completely fried. I cannot even process the legal jargon on these pages." I acted confused, playing perfectly into his misogynistic view of me as a financially incompetent woman who desperately needed his superior guidance to survive the real world. He watched me cry. I saw the tension instantly leave his shoulders. The anger dissolved, replaced by a sickening, triumphant glow. He loved seeing me look so broken. He thrived on my perceived weakness. It validated his superiority and fed his massive ego. He took a step back, adjusting his suit jacket, suddenly playing the magnanimous overlord again. He looked down at me with profound pity. "I am not trying to be difficult," I continued, sniffing loudly and wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "I just need a minute to breathe and clear my tired head. Please, Ryan, just give me exactly 48 hours. Let me read through the interest rates and the repayment schedule when I am not operating on 3 hours of sleep. I will sign it on Friday. I promise you. Just give me 2 days to wrap my head around it." I could see the gears turning in his head. He needed the money immediately to satisfy Jamal and prevent his mother from discovering her country club membership was actually canceled. But he also knew that pushing a sobbing, hysterical wife to sign a bank document was incredibly risky. If the bank ever investigated the loan origination, my current state could easily be classified as signing under extreme duress. A 2-day delay was dangerous for his timeline, but having my willing, unquestioning signature was the ultimate prize. It would legally bind me to his massive, completely fraudulent debt. He sighed a long, dramatic exhalation, designed to show me how incredibly patient and forgiving he was being. "Fine," he said coldly. "Friday morning, before you leave for the office, you sit at this counter and you sign every single page. Do not make me ask you twice. I am going to call the loan officer and tell him the documents will be on his desk by noon on Friday." But Natalie listened to me very carefully. He reached out and grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. His grip was firm and entirely devoid of affection. "If you try to pull another stunt, if you hesitate on Friday morning, I am packing my bags. I will leave you to drown in your father's medical debt, and I will take half of everything you have built. Do you understand me now?" "I understand," I whispered, keeping my voice meek and highly submissive. "Friday morning, I will have it all completely signed." Ryan let go of my chin. He picked up his leather briefcase, cast one last disgusted look at my tear-stained face, and walked out of the kitchen. "I am going to the gym," he announced over his shoulder. "Do not wait up for me." The heavy front door slammed shut. The moment he was gone, the tears stopped instantly. I stood up perfectly straight. I wiped my face with a cold paper towel. The performance was flawless. My legal trap was officially set. I now had exactly 48 hours to completely destroy him. The very next morning I woke up before dawn. Ryan was still asleep, exhausted from his frantic manufactured stress. I moved quietly around the bedroom, getting dressed in my sharpest tailored suit. I took the manila folder containing the home equity line of credit application from the counter and slid it into my leather briefcase. I left a handwritten note by the coffee maker saying I had an early supply chain meeting at the corporate office. I walked out to my car, started the engine, and drove into the downtown financial district. I had spent the previous night researching the most ruthless family law attorneys in the city. I needed someone who specialized in high-asset divorces and complex financial fraud. I found Sylvia Reed. Sylvia was a former corporate litigator who transitioned into family law specifically to dismantle spouses who tried to hide assets. She was aggressively precise and exactly the weapon I needed. I walked into her immaculate reception area at 8 o'clock in the morning. The receptionist escorted me into a corner office with panoramic views of the city skyline. Sylvia sat behind a large mahogany desk. She wore a pristine white blazer, and she looked directly at me with incredibly sharp, calculating eyes. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice," I said, taking a seat across from her. I placed my briefcase on the desk, unclasped the brass buckles, and pulled out the HELOC application, setting it between us. "My husband brought this home yesterday. He is demanding I sign it to take $100,000 of equity out of my house to fund his portfolio. If I do not sign the document by tomorrow morning, he threatened to divorce me and take half of everything I own." Sylvia glanced at the document, her expression completely neutral. "Is the house in your name exclusively?" "Yes," I replied very smoothly. "I bought it 2 years before I met him. He has never contributed a single cent to the mortgage or the down payment. I pay all the property taxes from my separate checking account." Sylvia nodded, making a note on her legal pad. "Then his threat to take half the house is entirely baseless. It is a premarital asset. If he has not contributed to its appreciation, he has zero legal claim to the property. But I assume you are not sitting in my office just to ask about a bluff." "You are absolutely right," I said, reaching back into my briefcase. I pulled out a stack of printed documents. These were the screenshots I had pulled from his tablet, the fake private equity templates, his depleted bank ledgers, and the emails proving he was running a scam. I laid the evidence out across the polished wood surface. I need an impenetrable legal firewall around my assets today, Sylvia. My husband is not just a financially controlling partner. He is actively committing federal wire fraud. He is running a miniature Ponzi scheme involving his wealthy brother-in-law and using my executive salary to cover his fake dividends. He needs this home equity loan to cover his stolen capital because I just cut off his funding supply. Sylvia leaned forward, her professional detachment replaced by predatory focus. She picked up the forged prospectuses and reviewed the bank ledgers showing Ryan spending the stolen seed capital on luxury goods. "This is extraordinary," Sylvia murmured, scanning the dates and amounts. "You have handed me a fully documented financial crime. He is entirely insolvent and he is trying to leverage your clean credit to bail himself out." "Exactly," I confirmed. "I need to know how to lock down my account so he cannot touch a single cent of my money when this illusion blows up." Sylvia moved with rapid efficiency. She pulled out a fresh legal pad. "First, we file for divorce today. The moment the petition is filed, an automatic financial restraining order goes into effect. It legally prevents either party from liquidating assets, taking out new loans, or altering the financial status quo. That kills his ability to process this home equity application, even if he forged your signature. Second, you will open a new completely separate checking account today. You will reroute your corporate direct deposits immediately. We are going to legally sever your financial ties before he realizes what is happening," Sylvia continued. "Third, I am drafting an emergency motion for exclusive use and possession of your premarital home. Given the documented evidence of his financial fraud and his attempts to coerce you into signing fraudulent loan documents, a judge will easily grant the order to remove him from the premises. He is a massive legal liability." I listened to her strategy, feeling an incredible wave of relief wash over me. The anxiety that had weighed on my chest for days evaporated. I was no longer a victim waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was an active participant in his absolute downfall. "Are you prepared to share this evidence with federal authorities?" Sylvia asked, looking directly at me. "I have already formed an alliance with the investor he defrauded," I replied confidently. "His legal team is drafting the federal wire fraud complaint as we speak. We are coordinating our strikes." Sylvia smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression that confirmed I had hired the absolute best person for the job. "Then let us build your fortress, Natalie. By the time he wakes up to the reality of his situation, he will be locked out of your bank accounts, locked out of your house, and locked out of his own future." I spent the next hour signing the official retainer agreement and the divorce petition. Every stroke of the pen felt like a chain breaking. I left her office at 10 o'clock in the morning, holding the ultimate weapon. The paperwork was filed. The firewall was fully active. My assets were legally shielded. Now I just had to prepare for the final execution to happen. When my phone buzzed with an incoming text later that afternoon, I was already back at my desk reviewing vendor contracts. It was a mass message from Patricia. She was officially announcing a lavish celebration for her 40th wedding anniversary to be held at the prestigious Oak Ridge Country Club this upcoming Saturday evening. The message was filled with exclamation points and strict demands for formal evening wear. She detailed the expensive menu, the premium open bar, and the live jazz band she had hired to entertain her wealthy social circle. Reading her text, I felt a sharp pang of cynical amusement. She was throwing a massive, expensive party entirely oblivious to the fact that her primary source of income had just been permanently severed. She simply assumed Ryan would handle all the peripheral costs, completely unaware that her golden child was currently drowning in a sea of fabricated financial returns. When I arrived home that evening, Ryan was already pacing the living room. The manic energy from the previous day had morphed into an aggressive, impatient edge. He had a glass of bourbon in his hand, and the ice clinked loudly as he moved. He did not ask about my day. He went straight for the jugular. "Did you see my mother's message?" he demanded, stopping in the middle of the expensive Persian rug. "The anniversary party is Saturday night. It is a major milestone, Natalie. Everyone who is anyone in our social circle is going to be there. I need you to be there, and I need you to play your part perfectly. I set my keys in the ceramic bowl. I would not miss it for the world, Ryan, I replied smoothly. It is going to be a very memorable evening. He took a quick sip of his drink, his eyes locking onto mine with desperate intensity. Good. Because I also need you to bring the signed home equity paperwork to the party. The loan officer is a member of the club, and he will be attending the event. If I hand him the executed documents directly at the reception, he can bypass the standard waiting period and fast-track the cash disbursement by Monday morning. I need that liquidity instantly to finalize my tech sector trades. Do you understand me? He was lying again. There was no tech sector trade, and there was certainly no loan officer waiting to process paperwork at a social event. Ryan simply wanted to guarantee that I brought the signed documents out of the house where he could physically take possession of them. He was using the social pressure of a massive family gathering to ensure my absolute compliance. He assumed I would never dare cause a scene or back out of an agreement in a room full of his high society friends. I nodded, projecting complete submission. I understand, Ryan. I reviewed the terms during my lunch break. I will sign everything and bring the entire packet to the club on Saturday. You will have exactly what you need. A massive wave of relief washed over his face. The rigid tension in his shoulders dropped immediately. He actually smiled a genuine, arrogant grin that made my stomach turn. He walked over and kissed my cheek, completely unaware that he was kissing the woman who had just legally locked him out of his own life. "That is my girl, Ryan," said his voice dripping with condescending approval. "I knew you would finally see reason. We are going to make a fortune, Nat. You just have to trust my vision." The next 48 hours were an exercise in extreme psychological endurance. I went to work, answered emails, and managed my supply chain teams with absolute focus. Behind the scenes, the trap was rapidly tightening. Jamal sent me a brief encrypted message on our secure channel confirming that his corporate litigation team had officially filed the federal wire fraud complaint. The authorities were actively moving on the information. Ryan was officially a target of a federal investigation, and his stolen seed capital was now a matter of public legal record. On Saturday afternoon, I stood in my bedroom preparing for the execution. I chose a stunning emerald green cocktail dress. It was elegant, powerful, and commanded attention. I applied my makeup with meticulous care, making sure I looked absolutely flawless. I wanted Patricia and Ryan to remember exactly how I looked when I dismantled their entire fraudulent empire. I walked over to my desk and picked up the thick manila folder containing the blank, unsigned home equity line of credit application. I shredded every single page of the bank document, letting the pieces fall into my wastebasket. Then, I pulled out a pristine stack of paper I had prepared earlier that day. It included the high-resolution screenshots of Ryan's barren checking account, the raw templates he used to forge Jamal's investment returns, and the final court-stamped copy of my divorce petition. I placed these devastating documents inside a beautiful heavy-stock crimson-red envelope. I sealed the flap and tied a delicate gold ribbon around it. It looked exactly like a generous high-end anniversary gift. It was the perfect Trojan horse. Ryan called up the stairs, his voice echoing with impatient urgency. "Natalie, the driver is here. We cannot be late for my mother's grand entrance." I grabbed the red envelope, sliding it carefully into my designer clutch. I took one last look in the mirror, rolling my shoulders back and taking a deep, steadying breath. I walked down the hardwood stairs, the heels of my shoes clicking with steady, deliberate rhythm. Ryan was waiting by the front door wearing a sharp tuxedo. He looked at my clutch, his eyes dropping to the edge of the red envelope peeking out from the top. "You have the paperwork?" he asked, his voice low and tight. I patted the clutch, offering him a brilliant, cold smile. "I have absolutely everything we need for tonight, Ryan. The transfer of power is going to be incredibly smooth." He held the front door open for me, completely blind to the reality of his situation. We climbed into the back of the waiting black car. As the vehicle pulled away from my premarital home and headed toward the Oak Ridge Country Club, I looked out the window into the dark evening. Ryan spent the entire 20-minute ride scrolling through his phone, likely verifying his fraudulent bank balances, and practicing the lies he would tell his wealthy brother-in-law. He did not speak to me, assuming his victory was already secured. I sat in perfect silence, feeling the heavy metallic weight of the red envelope resting in my hands. The firewall was built. The evidence was secured. The federal charges were filed. The arrogant man sitting next to me had absolutely no idea that he was taking a luxury car ride straight to his own funeral. The black car pulled to a stop beneath the brilliantly illuminated portico of the Oak Ridge Country Club. Valets in crisp uniforms rushed forward to open our doors. Ryan stepped out first, adjusting his tuxedo jacket and projecting the aura of a wealthy elite. He offered me his hand, playing the devoted husband for the watching staff. I took it, stepping out of the back seat, my grip on the crimson envelope tight and deliberate. The sheer opulence of the country club was suffocating. Heavy crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow across the marble lobby. Ryan thrived in this environment, feeding on the performative displays of extreme wealth. He loudly greeted the club manager by his first name, making a highly visible show of handing the valet a crisp $50 bill. He was spending money he absolutely did not have, desperately trying to maintain an illusion that was currently collapsing around his ankles. I followed him into the main ballroom. The room was breathtakingly decorated for Patricia's 40th anniversary. Towering floral centerpieces dominated every table. Waiters in black ties circulated with silver trays of expensive champagne. Patricia had spared zero expense for this event, blissfully oblivious to the fact that her primary financial sponsor was currently facing total ruin. We spotted Ryan's family near the room's center. Patricia was holding court, surrounded by affluent friends. She wore a glittering silver gown, accepting compliments with practiced humility. Standing a few feet away was Jamal. He looked immaculate in a tailored blue suit, but his posture was rigid and highly observant. He scanned the room with the clinical precision of a predator identifying its target. His eyes locked onto mine the moment I walked through the double oak doors. Ryan immediately veered toward his mother, eager to secure his position as the center of her attention. He completely abandoned me in the middle of the ballroom, his focus entirely consumed by networking with Patricia's wealthy friends. This gave me the exact window of opportunity I needed. I walked smoothly toward the mahogany bar at the far end of the room, pretending to order a drink. Jamal detached himself from his corner and mirrored my movement, arriving at the polished counter just as the bartender handed me a glass of sparkling water. We stood shoulder to shoulder, both facing the crowded ballroom, looking exactly like two in-laws making casual, polite conversation. Neither of us smiled. "The federal complaint is officially in the system," Jamal murmured over the music, keeping his eyes carefully trained on the crowd. My corporate litigation team pushed the final paperwork through the federal court portal exactly 20 minutes ago. The federal judge reviewed the digital evidence you provided from his personal tablet. Based on the forged templates and the misappropriation of my seed capital, the judge instantly signed an emergency freeze order on Ryan's secondary LLC account. I took a slow sip of my water, feeling an incredible surge of adrenaline. So he is now completely locked out. Totally locked out, Jamal confirmed. He cannot move a single cent. He cannot liquidate any funds or hide his digital tracks. Federal investigators have already formally subpoenaed his banking records. The wire fraud charges are fully active. He is currently standing in this country club as the target of a federal criminal investigation. I looked down at the crimson envelope resting perfectly inside my clutch. "I have the divorce petition and the financial audits right here," I whispered back. "The emergency order for exclusive use of my house was granted this afternoon. His key code to the front door has been permanently deleted from the security system." I packed his custom suits and luxury golf clubs into garbage bags and left them in the driveway before the driver picked us up. Jamal let out a low, dark chuckle, raising his glass slightly. "You did not leave a single stone unturned, Natalie. He is going to lose his mind when he realizes what is in that envelope. Does he still think it is the home equity loan application?" "He is completely convinced," I replied, watching Ryan laugh loudly across the room. "He told me to keep the paperwork safe until he gives me the signal. He plans to hand it to a loan officer tonight to fast-track the cash disbursement. He thinks he is securing $100,000 to pay your fake returns." Brittany suddenly appeared beside us, shattering our quiet, strategic conversation. She wore a highly restrictive designer dress and looked incredibly annoyed. She completely ignored me, focusing her frustration entirely on her husband. "Jamal, there you are," Brittany loudly complained, crossing her arms. "You need to talk to Ryan. He promised the transfer would clear by this afternoon, and my account is showing nothing. The leasing office called twice today about the Porsche. Tell him to stop messing around and just wire the cash." Jamal looked at his wife with an expression of profound cold detachment. "Do not worry, Brittany," Jamal said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Ryan and I are going to have a very detailed discussion about his investment portfolio tonight. I guarantee you, the issue with your car payment is going to be completely resolved before this party is over." Brittany sighed dramatically, totally missing the lethal undertone of his promise. "Thank you. He is so obsessed with maximizing his yields that he forgets normal people have bills to pay." She grabbed a glass of champagne from a waiter and stalked off toward her mother. Jamal and I exchanged one final knowing look. The stage was perfectly set. The legal mechanisms were actively tearing down Ryan's life in the background, invisible to everyone in the room. The extravagant food, the beautiful flowers, and the expensive music were merely the backdrop for the absolute destruction of a con artist. We just had to wait for Patricia to call for everyone's attention. The speeches were about to begin, and I was ready to deliver the final devastating blow. The clinking of silverware against fine china eventually slowed as the lavish five-course meal came to an end. Waiters glided silently through the ballroom, clearing plates and refilling champagne flutes. A warm, expectant hush fell over the room as the jazz band brought their music to a gentle halt. At the head table, Patricia stood up, smoothing the front of her glittering silver gown. She picked up a silver spoon and tapped it lightly against her crystal glass. The sharp, clear ringing commanded the immediate attention of every single guest in the country club. Ryan sat to her right, leaning back in his chair with a posture of absolute supreme confidence. He rested one arm casually across the back of his seat, exuding the relaxed authority of a self-made billionaire. He had spent the entire dinner playing the role of the benevolent patriarch, pouring expensive wine for his mother's affluent friends and nodding sagely whenever the current state of the global economy was mentioned. I sat to his left, keeping my hands folded perfectly in my lap, my emerald green dress striking a stark contrast against the dark mahogany table. My designer clutch rested right beside my plate, holding the crimson envelope containing his absolute demise. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Patricia began, her voice projecting clearly into the microphone set up near the head table. She offered a practiced, gracious smile to the crowd of wealthy socialites and distant relatives. 40 years ago, my late husband and I began a beautiful journey together. He built a foundation for this family, a foundation of love, security, and unwavering support. When he passed, I was terrified of what the future held. I worried about how our family legacy would survive. She paused dramatically, placing a hand over her heart and letting her gaze shift directly to Ryan. The sheer adoration in her eyes was almost suffocating to witness. "But I never should have worried," Patricia continued, her voice swelling with immense manufactured pride. "Because my son Ryan stepped up. He did not just fill his father's shoes. He built an empire. He took on the heavy mantle of leadership, guiding our family through uncertain waters with his incredible financial genius. Ryan has a mind for business that truly astounds me every single day. His dedication to his investments, his relentless work ethic, and his profound generosity have kept this family not just secure, but thriving beyond our wildest dreams." A polite murmur of agreement rippled through the ballroom. Brittany, seated across the table next to an intensely observant Jamal, nodded vigorously, raising her glass in agreement. Ryan lowered his head slightly, putting on an incredibly convincing display of humble modesty. "He never asks for recognition," Patricia declared to the room, her tone elevating into pure worship. "He quietly manages his vast portfolio, generating the wealth that allows us to enjoy beautiful evenings, just like this one. He is the ultimate provider. He makes sure his sister has everything she needs. He ensures his mother never has to worry about a single mortgage payment. Ryan is the absolute gold standard of a son, a brother, and a husband. The audience broke into enthusiastic applause. Ryan smiled graciously, acknowledging the room with a slight wave of his hand. It was a masterclass in delusion. Patricia was standing in a room rented with fraudulent money, wearing a dress likely funded by my executive bonuses, publicly praising a man who literally had less than $4,000 to his name. The irony was so dense it was practically suffocating. I watched Jamal out of the corner of my eye. The software entrepreneur was clapping slowly, his dark eyes locked onto Ryan, with the terrifying intensity of a predator watching its prey step blindly into a trap. Patricia turned her attention back to the table, specifically locking eyes with me. "And of course we must acknowledge Natalie," she said, her voice dropping into a register of artificial sweetness. "Behind every great man is a woman who understands her role. Natalie has learned to trust Ryan's financial leadership, supporting his vision and allowing him to build their future. We are so thrilled she has finally realized the true value of relying on my son." Ryan shifted in his seat, turning his head slightly toward me. The applause died down and the room settled into a comfortable, expectant quiet. This was the exact moment he had meticulously planned. He caught my eye and gave me a sharp, subtle nod. It was the signal. He was commanding me to produce the home equity line of credit paperwork. He expected me to pull out a document signing away $100,000 of my personal equity, validating his fake empire right in front of his wealthy audience. I did not break eye contact with him. I reached down and smoothly unclasped my designer clutch. My fingers brushed against the heavy stock of the crimson envelope. I pulled it out, resting it on the white linen tablecloth. The gold ribbon caught the light from the massive crystal chandeliers above. Ryan's eyes darted to the envelope. A flicker of severe confusion crossed his face. He was expecting a standard bank folder, not a beautifully wrapped gift. But his colossal ego quickly overrode his logic. He assumed I had decided to present the massive loan document as a highly theatrical romantic gesture of my absolute submission to his financial dominance. His arrogant smile returned, broader and more self-assured than ever. He nodded again silently, urging me to stand up and deliver his salvation. I stood up slowly, picking up the crimson envelope. The fabric of my emerald dress rustled quietly as I moved around the large mahogany table. Every single eye in the ballroom followed my movement. I stopped right next to Patricia, turning to face the entire room. Ryan leaned forward in his chair, practically vibrating with greedy anticipation. He thought his financial crisis was officially over. I held the microphone with my left hand, the crimson envelope in my right. "Patricia is absolutely right," I projected my voice, letting it carry across the vast, silent ballroom. "Ryan has indeed been managing an incredibly complex financial operation. He has spent years building a system that kept this family living in luxury. And because he and I agreed to keep our finances completely separate, I felt it was only appropriate to bring a gift tonight that honors exactly how that system operates." I turned to Patricia and handed her the red envelope. She took it with a gracious, sickeningly sweet smile, untying the gold ribbon. Ryan watched her, his chest puffing out with pride. He leaned closer, ready to accept the applause for the massive equity loan he thought I was handing over. Patricia slid her manicured fingers under the flap and pulled out the thick stack of documents. Her smile faltered immediately. She stared at the top page, her brow furrowing in deep confusion. It was not a bank loan. It was a highly detailed, color-coded spreadsheet. "What is this, Natalie?" Patricia asked, her voice faltering into the microphone. "These are banking ledgers." "Those are my personal banking ledgers, Patricia," I answered, ensuring the microphone picked up every single syllable. "Specifically, the transaction history for my executive bonus account over the past 36 months. I highlighted the outbound wire transfers in bright red so you could see them clearly. Every single month on the first, my account pushed exactly $3,000 into your personal checking account." A heavy, confused murmur swept through the ballroom. Guests exchanged bewildered glances. Ryan jolted in his seat, the blood instantly draining from his face. "Natalie, stop talking!" Ryan hissed, lunging forward to snatch the papers out of his mother's hands. "Give me those right now." I stepped smoothly out of his reach. "Do not interrupt the presentation, Ryan," I said sharply. I looked back out at the crowd of wealthy socialites. For 3 years, Ryan told all of you that he was a brilliant investor. He told his mother and his sister that his aggressive tech portfolio was generating massive returns. He claimed he was paying Patricia's non-existent mortgage and funding Brittany's luxury car leases out of his own massive wealth. But the truth is, Ryan has absolutely zero investments. He has zero capital. That $3,000 you spent every month on country club fees and spa weekends came directly from my supply chain director's salary. "Shut up!" Ryan screamed, his voice cracking with pure terror. He knocked over his chair, scrambling around the table. "She is lying. She is having a mental breakdown. Security, get her out of here right now." Patricia stared at the highlighted bank statements in her hands, turning a ghastly shade of white as the undeniable mathematical reality set in. She looked at her son, seeing the raw, sweating panic on his face, and the illusion of her golden child shattered instantly. Before Ryan could take another step toward me, a large hand clamped down hard on his shoulder, stopping him dead in his tracks. Jamal had moved from his seat with terrifying speed. He spun Ryan around and shoved him roughly back into the dining chair. Ryan collapsed into the seat, staring up at his brother-in-law with wide, fearful eyes. Jamal did not look at Ryan. He looked at the entire ballroom. He reached inside his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a thick legal-bound document, slamming it down onto the center of the mahogany table with a deafening crack. The sound echoed off the crystal chandeliers. "She is not lying," Jamal announced, his deep voice commanding absolute silence from the stunned crowd. "And the monthly allowance she just exposed is only a fraction of the actual crime." Brittany jumped up from her chair, looking frantically between her husband and her brother. "Jamal, what are you doing? What crime?" Jamal turned his cold, analytical gaze to his wife. "Your brother is a con artist, Brittany. He is a fraud who runs a pathetic small-scale Ponzi scheme. 2.5 years ago, he pitched me an exclusive algorithmic trading model. He showed me forged prospectuses and fake historical data. He used his position as my brother-in-law to bypass my standard auditing protocols. I wired him $150,000 in seed capital." The ballroom erupted into loud gasps. Patricia dropped the red envelope onto the table, covering her mouth with her trembling hands. "He never invested a single dime." Jamal continued, projecting his voice over the rising chaos. "He took my $150,000 and blew it on Vegas hotel suites, designer watches, and expensive dinners to maintain the illusion that he was a high-rolling executive. His bank account currently holds less than $4,000. And to keep me from asking questions about my principal, he used Natalie's monthly salary transfers to pay me fake quarterly dividends. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and he was using his own wife as the bank." Ryan sat slumped in his chair, hyperventilating. He looked like a deflated balloon. "Jamal, please," Ryan gasped, clutching at his chest. "We can fix this. I can get the money back. Do not do this here." "I am not doing anything here," Ryan, Jamal replied with absolute zero mercy. "The federal government is doing it. That document I just put on the table is a copy of the federal wire fraud complaint my litigation team filed this afternoon. You forged financial documents and transmitted them across state lines. A federal judge has already signed an emergency freeze order on every single account associated with your name. You are entirely locked out. You cannot move, you cannot hide, and you cannot trade your way out of a federal indictment." The wealthy elite of the Oak Ridge Country Club began murmuring furiously, pulling out their phones in utter disbelief. Patricia collapsed into her chair, her perfectly manicured hands covering her face as she sobbed. The tears were not for her son's impending incarceration. They were for her own immediate catastrophic social death. The affluent friends she had spent decades trying to impress were now actively backing away from the head table, severing their ties to the Blackwell family in real time. Brittany started screaming at Ryan, her voice cracking, as she realized her luxurious lifestyle, her Porsche, and her entire identity were completely funded by stolen money and my stolen wages. Ryan was a hollow, empty shell of a man. His chest heaved with shallow, frantic breaths. He looked up at me with terrified, red-rimmed eyes. He reached a trembling hand out toward the red envelope still resting on the table. "Natalie, please." Ryan begged, his voice a pathetic, broken whisper. "You have the home equity paperwork. If you just sign it right now, I can pay Jamal back. I can make the family whole again. Please, you have to save me." I looked down at the man I had married. There was no pity in my chest. There was only the cold, sharp clarity of absolute justice. I reached into the crimson envelope one final time and pulled out the thick stack of legal documents I had prepared with Sylvia. They were bound with a heavy blue legal clip, the official court stamp pressed clearly into the top right corner. I dropped the stack directly onto Ryan's lap. The heavy paper hit his thighs with a definitive thud. "That is not a loan application, Ryan," I said, keeping my voice loud enough for the remaining country club guests to hear every single syllable. "That is a court-stamped petition for divorce. I filed it yesterday morning. My lawyer also secured an emergency order granting me exclusive use of my premarital home. You are legally locked out. Your bags are currently sitting in garbage sacks at the end of my driveway." Ryan stared at the divorce papers as if they were venomous snakes. He shook his head violently, completely unable to process the magnitude of his total destruction. "You cannot do this to me. We are married. We are supposed to be a team. You cannot just abandon me when I need you the most." I leaned down, placing both of my hands firmly on the mahogany table. I looked directly into his panicked, weeping eyes, and I delivered the exact words he had used to condemn himself in that hospital corridor. "I am not abandoning you, Ryan," I said smoothly. "I am simply adhering to your strict financial boundaries. I cannot jeopardize my core assets to bail you out of your own gross mismanagement. Like you said, your parents are your responsibility. Your money is yours. My money is mine. And this massive federal fraud indictment is entirely yours." I straightened my posture, smoothing the fabric of my emerald green dress. I turned to look at Patricia, who was still weeping into her napkin, and Brittany, who was staring at the divorce papers in absolute horror. "Have a wonderful anniversary, Patricia," I said politely. "I hope the rest of the evening is incredibly memorable for you all." I turned on my heel and walked away from the head table. Jamal fell into step right beside me. We walked through the grand ballroom together, parting the sea of stunned country club guests. Nobody said a word to us. We walked out the heavy oak doors, through the crystal-lit lobby, and out into the crisp, cool night air. The valets brought our respective cars. Jamal gave me a firm nod of absolute respect before getting into his vehicle. I climbed into mine, the heavy weight of the past 3 years finally gone. 6 months later, the universe balanced its scales with absolute, uncompromising precision. The federal government did not show Ryan any mercy. The digital evidence I provided, combined with Jamal's aggressive corporate litigation, resulted in a swift and brutal trial. Ryan pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud to avoid a longer sentence, but he was still sentenced to federal prison. He lost his tailored suits, his arrogant smirk, and his freedom. Patricia lost her entire false reality. Without my $3,000 monthly transfers to prop up her lifestyle, she defaulted on her various luxury subscriptions and credit cards. The country club formally revoked her membership due to the public scandal and non-payment. She was eventually forced to sell the sprawling suburban house just to cover her son's mounting legal defense fees. She moved into a small, modest apartment in a completely different city, far away from the social circle she had spent her entire life trying to impress. Brittany faced her own harsh reality. Jamal filed for divorce the Monday following the country club disaster. With ironclad prenuptial agreements in place and evidence of her complicity in spending his stolen funds, she walked away with practically nothing. Her luxury car was repossessed, and she was forced to actually get a job to support herself. As for me, I flourished. The money I saved from cutting off Patricia fully funded my father's rehabilitation. He recovered beautifully and now navigates his retrofitted, accessible home with ease. My career skyrocketed. Free from the emotional and financial drain of a toxic marriage, I focused my energy entirely on my goals. I was promoted to Vice President of Global Supply Chain just 3 months after my divorce was finalized. Jamal and I remained excellent friends, frequently meeting for coffee to discuss real, legitimate business ventures. Sometimes the greatest lesson you can learn about love is knowing exactly when to withdraw it. You cannot buy respect from people who only view you as a disposable resource. You cannot build an empire with a partner who is secretly digging a grave beneath your feet. But you can absolutely refuse to fund your own disrespect. You can draw a hard line, secure your fortress, and let toxic people drown in the consequences of their own actions. Have you ever been taken for granted by a partner or their family? Have you ever had to establish a ruthless financial boundary to protect your own future? Let me know how you handled it in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you believe that everyone deserves to be valued for who they are, not just what they can pay for.